It being a little past 6 p.m., we'll go ahead and call the Winnebago County Board of Supervisors to order for March 2nd, 2021. The clerk has confirmed the roll. All members are present except for Supervisor Newhoff and Supervisor Locke. Supervisor Locke does our invocation. We do anticipate her, so we will hold off on the invocation after the pledge and then come back to it once we see that she has arrived. So we'll move on to the first item on the agenda, and that's the Pledge of Allegiance. And I'd ask everyone to stand, repeat after me. I pledge allegiance
to the
United
United States of America,
and to
for which it stands,
one
one
nation,
nation, under God, indivisible.
with liberty and justice.
justice for all.
Please go ahead and be seated. We'll do the invocation once the arrival of Supervisor Locke. So we'll move on then to the next item on the agenda, and that's the adoption of this evening's agenda. For that, I'll call on Supervisor Albrecht.
Move to adopt this evening's agenda.
There's a motion and a second to adopt this evening's agenda. Any changes or questions in regards to the agenda? Seeing none, we'll do a voice vote. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. And that motion carries. And just as a reminder to all the county board supervisors, if at any time we're doing a voice vote and you have a nay vote and you're not certain if we had recorded or could hear your voice, just go ahead and raise your Zoom hand during that actual vote, and then we will clarify the vote with you. So that motion carries. So we'll move on down to the next item, and that's the approval of the proceedings from February 23rd, 2021. I'll ask for a motion to bring it forward, and then there are some clarifications and adjustments. But first, I'll ask for a motion to approve.
So move.
There's a motion and a second to approve. Now, I want to clarify a couple things so that we can make some changes. So first of all, because of obviously the technology, sometimes there's difficulty in being able to record and confirm all the votes. And so we wanted to clarify, not only for the record from what occurred at the last meeting, but also for the minutes that you have, that there are some listed as not recorded, but that's not correct. So just to clarify, those that are not recorded where it's not correct, who actually voted aye in the resolution that referred to the general health order from the health officer. And that was the motion to postpone indefinitely. So once again, there were 5 individuals listed as not recorded who actually voted aye. And those individuals are Supervisor Konetsky, Supervisor Newhoff, Supervisor Fingren, Supervisor Lautenschlager, and Supervisor Locke. And additionally, Supervisor Nussbaum had abstained from that vote. So I would ask, so that we can clarify the record, for a motion for that amendment to the proceedings that you have.
I move to amend the record.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to amend the record as reflected as I outlined. Any discussion or any difference from any supervisor in regards to that vote? Because we want to make sure we have it clear, because we know it wasn't the first time around. If so, any supervisor, please go ahead and raise their Zoom hand if they need any clarification. Okay, seeing none, then we'll vote on the amendment. Okay, Supervisor Wingren, before we do, I believe Supervisor Wingren had a question. Please go ahead, Supervisor Wingren.
No, I was just trying to see if you heard me, because I could not get in to speak before.
Okay, very good. We can hear you well now.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Supervisor Wingren.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, please go ahead.
I did vote for it.
Yes, and absolutely, and that's what we're correcting here, Supervisor Konecki, so thank you. Any other questions from any county board supervisor? Okay, very good. So this will be voting on to amend the proceedings, and then we'll vote on the amended proceedings, okay? All those in favor of the amendment, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay, or if you're uncertain, raise your Zoom hand and I'll call you to clarify. Okay, seeing none, that motion carries. Now we're going to go ahead, officially vote on those those minutes as amended. All right, any questions in regards to that? Very good. We'll do a voice vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay, or raise your Zoom hand. Very good. That motion carries. Moving on to the next item on the agenda, and that's a time during each meeting that we give an opportunity for the public to speak for any item on the agenda this evening or any item under county jurisdiction. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak this evening? If so, please go ahead and raise your Zoom hand and I'll call on you in succession. Is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak this evening? I'll ask again, is there anyone from the public who wishes to speak this evening? One more time, I'll ask, is there anyone who wishes to speak? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close that portion of the agenda and we'll move on to reports from committees, commissions, and boards. Any reports from any commissions or boards from any supervisors? If so, go ahead and raise your Zoom hand. Okay, no reports. So we will move then to the next item, County Board Chairman's report. Not too much to report because we just had a meeting, as you all know, but just a reminder, we have a vacancy in District 10. The public announcement period we have done. So like I said last week, I do anticipate to have a recommendation to you by the March 16th meeting. That is the likely case. At the latest, it would be April, but I anticipate by the March meeting. And then I wanted to do a little follow-up with you all in regards to some of the discussion about motions last week. Because that was a good discussion and good questions that folks had. So I just wanted to do two things. One of them that still may need some clarification, but at least want you to know what I have found out. Vice Chairperson Egan had asked the question when we had voted to postpone indefinitely the general health order, whether or not it could come back. And I had told him, I think if a supervisor asks to have it on agenda, that is the case, but I don't know for sure. And so I did a little looking. And I'll tell you, there's going to be more looking before, but I just want to let you know what I found so far. I will be speaking with the Corporation Counsel directly to get her view on it, nonetheless, okay? But I wanted to let you know what I found. And I went to the Roberts Rules of Order, the big book, okay? There's small books, and then there's the big book. And so under postpone indefinitely, they do have a section on effect on the pending motion. I'm going to read it verbatim to you, actually, because I have a certain interpretation. Once again, I'm going to ask the Corporation Counsel if she agrees, but I think it's useful for you to hear the exact words so that you can also come up with your own interpretation. So it says this: effect on the pending motion. The effect of postponing a question indefinitely is to suppress it throughout the current session. In a convention of conference consisting of several meetings, the suppression continues throughout the entire series of meetings, and in ordinary societies, it also goes on to say, and in ordinary societies throughout the weekly, monthly, or other meeting as the case may be. Consequently, the adoption of the motion to postpone indefinitely is in effect an indirect rejection of the main motion. So once again, this is just my interpretation, and that's why we'll get an official interpretation, okay? But my interpretation is different than what I had told you last week. That, to me, if the way I read it, looks like that you wouldn't be able to bring that exact motion back based on that reading, because it says ordinary societies throughout the weekly, monthly, or other meeting, as the case may be. That doesn't mean that another order couldn't come forward, but not that order. Once again, that's my interpretation. I wanted you to know what I found. That does not mean I'm 100% right. I'm going to ask the Corporation Counsel to review that passage and anything else that she may find in Robert's rules to get her interpretation. Nonetheless, wanted to provide that information for you, what I've learned so far. And then finally, just in regards to Robert's rules, because this came up with Supervisor Eisen's motion, and he was correct in what he said. And I just wanted to make sure everyone knew conceptually why that occurred and how that occurred. And so what I'm referring to is there was a motion at one time on the floor to postpone indefinitely, and then he was putting forward a motion to commit or refer to committee. He ultimately withdrew that, and there wasn't a second, so that we didn't actually take up that. However, he was bringing up the fact that it takes precedent, and he was correct. So for different motions, there is a rank order of hierarchy of precedence of different motions in Robert's rules. And frankly, the main motion itself is like the lowest rank possible. So pretty much almost any other motion takes precedent, and then we begin debate or to consider that motion. So postpone indefinitely is just one step higher than the main motion. If we would have considered postponing to a time certain, actually, that actually has higher rank than to commit or refer to committee. So then that would take precedence. So I guess what I'm telling you is, so first of all, what the supervisor said last week is correct. And I wanted everyone to be on the same page as to why that is the case. And it's basically because the different motions that a person make have more higher or lower rank than other ones. And whatever has the highest rank, that's the one that takes precedent at that time. And that's why actually when someone called the previous question, we were calling the previous question because that then took precedence at that point. So just wanted to provide some clarification information since that came up last week, and I thought it might be useful for everyone to hear. And with that, that concludes my report for this evening. So we'll move on to the main items.
There's a raised hand.
Okay, thank you. Supervisor Eisen, please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As long as you're straightening things out, I'd like to bring to your attention, there was a second to my motion made by Supervisor Fari. What didn't occur is the formal withdrawal of the second.
Very good. Thank you for that clarification, Supervisor, and you would be correct. Thank you, Supervisor. Very good. Any other questions? All right, very good. So we'll go ahead and close that portion of the agenda. We'll move on to the other specific agenda items related to 4 presentations this evening. The first one is a presentation and discussion in regards to the construction of an additional evidence garage on the current Sheriff's Office campus. And for that, I'll call on Sheriff Motz. Sheriff?
You're unmuted.
Good evening, and I want to thank everybody for listening to tonight's presentation. I want to introduce Kelly Schmitz. She is our evidence technician. She will run the presentation and answer any questions that you may have. I will be available, so if you have questions during or after the presentation, I'll be available. Thank you.
Please go ahead.
Trying.
Very good.
Can everybody see my screen, the sheriff's or the evidence garage?
Yes, we can see it well.
Okay, good. So my name is Kelly Schmitz. I'm the evidence supervisor at the Winnebago County Sheriff's Office. I'll try not to take too much of your time tonight. But I'm here to discuss our spacing needs in the evidence garage, our current status and our future outlook of the evidence garage. As you can see, it's full right now. It's 62 by 95 feet. And we currently have 15 vehicles, a dump trailer, and 12 pallets of unboxed evidence. So we are full, as you can see. That's what it looks like on January 28th. Hasn't changed much, except that instead of the one of the black vehicles, we have a dump trailer in it now. We've been forced to utilize an off-site building called the Butler Building. There we've been authorized to store 3 vehicles and 2 boats. Because of their cumbersome nature, we don't have room for them. So the DA's office has given the blessing that we utilize this building. There are problems with this building, which I'll go in and explain. And I'll go in and explain all that in my presentation. Some things that cause us to be full is under Wisconsin statute, we're obligated to retain evidence that has any biological material on it and that was involved in a criminal investigation with a conviction. We're obligated to hold these items until the person has been convicted and adjudicated. So that time and fully discharged from their sentence. So that means retaining it until they're off probation. This allows for the reevaluation of evidence and for an appeal in case there was one. We currently have 2 freezers that contain legal blood draws from OWI cases, and they're full of evidence. So that just gives you an idea that, I mean, that's just an OWI case. We're obligated to hold those OWI kits until somebody's off probation. So sometimes it's, a couple years, sometimes it's 10 years. Our policy is that we'll seize abandoned, stolen, and contraband and evidence that's to keep it as evidence, to keep it in our possession in case it's needed. Something that's considered evidence can link a suspect to a crime or relate to the crime. So if it can tie somebody to that crime, we're going to keep it as evidence. And it's our duty that we protect it from loss, any damage, and maintain its integrity. So if it comes in a certain way, we're expected to maintain it and keep it that way. This is just the process of our evidence collection and how it goes. So a deputy will collect it on scene, return to the sheriff's office, package it. They'll fill out a barcode and then place it into that secure locker. Once that's secured, the only person that has access to that is me. I'll then make sure that it's packaged correctly. It's not, like drugs are packaged a certain way, things like that. I scan it in and then I put it into a storage facility, whether it's boxes or a freezer or double lock it if it's drugs, things like that. So on the right, you can see that that's a shelf that contains all kinds of boxes. Those boxes all contain barcodes of items. And we have 5 large rolling shelves in this evidence area. All but 1 are full right now. So for a storage situation, we have an evidence garage, an evidence room that contains various shelves and freezers and locking cabinets, and a safe as well. Like I said, we have 5 large rolling shelves that hold boxes and a freezer and another freezer that's on its way because we know that we're expected to retain the OWI kits for evidence. So that's just a picture of the rolling shelves that we have. On the upper right is a cabinet that is for firearm storage. That cabinet is for actually court-ordered firearm seizure or TR or restraining order seizures. Those firearms are kept in those cabinets. The one down below on the right are locking cabinets that contain boxes of drugs and drug paraphernalia that was seized. Last year, we took in approximately 1,700 items for evidence. But not everything fits into a box. So our secure evidence garage will also hold pallets, or like you see here in a drug bust that they had, there were 40 plants taken, and they have to remain on the floor in order to dry out before it's packaged. That takes about a month. So that's floor space that's really critical in case that we were to take in cars or anything large. But we've taken up to 500 plants in one of the seizures. In the bottom picture, you'll see pallets of items that were seized. All that equipment is part of the grow operation. So that's all evidence. And that is all one case. So that's 3 pallets of evidence right there that we have to hold on to until the case is closed. So we have 3 types of, I should say, I'm sorry, I'll back up here. Some items, like you can see in the picture, these are items taken in a burglary complaint. The deputies or the detectives in a 2020 case recovered about 248 items that were linked to 2 storage unit burglaries. So imagine anything that fits in a storage unit, those are items that are recovered. They have to be put somewhere. So we put them in our evidence garage. Not everything needs to be packaged and things like that. So that's why they're all kind of scattered out and allows for the victims to come in and ID things. But right now we have, I think I said 12 pallets of items like that. And that takes up, I mean, right there is 2 car widths of space. So that takes up space from vehicles. We have a temporary garage that's utilized similar to a submittal locker. So when a large item such as a car or something that can't fit into that smaller locker you saw, a deputy will put it into this evidence garage, secure it, and the only person that has access to it is me once it's secured. I have one backup, and that would be the detective lieutenant, but otherwise it's just me. So it's secured, put away, and again, the only person that has access is me. This is an example of the temporary garage. So this was a car that was seized for evidence at a fatal crash. We tow it to the garage, and there it remains. Once the deputies lock it up, again, like I said, I'm the only one that'll gain access to it, whether it's to do a search warrant on the car there and maybe release it from the temporary garage or move it into the big permanent garage that you saw at the very beginning of the presentation. So we have 3 types of lengths, I guess 3 types of storage for lengthwise. We have a short-term storage length, or basically pending investigation. As you can see, this is a 3-vehicle crash. These vehicles are currently in evidence. We're still, and this happened in November. We're still investigating the matter, waiting on a drug panel to return on the driver that ran a stop sign. The drug panel can take up to 6 months in order to get the result. So that's 6 months that we're holding on to these vehicles, waiting on results, waiting on to see if there's going to be potential charges to present to the DA's office. So this takes up a lot of space. As you can see, that Lowe's truck, it takes up almost the whole walkway of the garage. So this is a short term. I mean, this is just pending investigation. And in this matter, I don't see anything criminally going, but that's going to be up to the DA's office. So I mean, we're at least holding on to this vehicle for 6 months. The next length is medium term. In this case, this is a 2016 fatality that resulted in a guilty verdict. Defendant is requesting that these vehicles be retained because there is DNA on these vehicles. So he is potentially going to be incarcerated until 2025. So we could have these vehicles up until 2025, if not longer, if something happens. So that's medium term. We have to hold on to these vehicles because the state statutes say we have to. And so they fill up our garage space. The next length is a long term. This was a 2016 sexual assault case that resulted in a conviction. The defendant was sentenced to 18 years in prison, and he is appealing the case. So I have to retain this evidence. So this is sitting in our garage. And we could have this vehicle potentially for 18 years. So just have to think that that's something that just takes up precious space in our garage that long a time. Like I said, this is we've had to utilize an offsite building for storage. And we do this with the approval of the DA's office. What we have there right now is our two boats from our 2018 double fatality, boating fatality, and 3 vehicles that we have to retain for DNA purposes. The DA has acknowledged that there are problems with the Butler building. By problems, I mean it's accessible to all county employees. Like I said before, the other evidence is only accessible by me. I'm the only one that has a key. But this building, anybody, all county deputies can scan into the building. It's accessible to maintenance personnel, to parks facilities, to highway personnel, and it's not monitored. So it's off-site, and it's just the potential of something happening to the evidence is, I mean, that exists. And we could face legal ramifications if that evidence integrity were to be challenged. The DA is aware of that, but they make that decision to store it there, or they allow us to store it there knowing that. So some of the pictures, the 2 boats, as you can see, there's lawnmowers parked next to them. We do have some reserve squads there for our deputies. It's not an ideal situation. I was talking to a reserve deputy one day who said that he was walking around the boat and checking it out. And it's upsetting because that's evidence. We're required to maintain that evidence. We're required to protect it, and utilizing that building doesn't do that. Also at that building on the outside is a shipping container that has a vehicle from a 1993 homicide. So that's just, we're utilizing space that we shouldn't be using. What I do to help that is I'm constantly purging the evidence. I'm reviewing the cases, seeing if there's anything I can return to people, either donate or destroy if it's drugs or things like that. In 2019, I helped create a county ordinance that allows for the easier disposition of evidence and property. I'm constantly talking with the DA's office to see if there's any evidence I can either return or properly dispose of. I send out DNA notification letters to defendants to see if evidence that has DNA can be released or destroyed. And we're also training our deputies to process scenes in lieu of basically taking in certain items, like latent lift processing. We're swabbing items at the scene. We're training all our deputies to basically do the little things of a detective can do in lieu of collecting large items. So our future plans, time is of the essence. As you can see, our garage is full. It's unfortunate. We know that I hate to say it, we're 25% water. There's eventually going to be another boating fatality. and we're going to be required to take those boats. And we have to be able to put them somewhere. So we're forced to think about that future. That's, you know, it's not good reasons why we collect this evidence usually on these vehicles, but we have to think about that and be ready for it. Evidence is collected every day, and we're in need of storage, and it's imperative that we provide a place for it. We've addressed the storage concerns 4 to 5 years ago, and we tried, you know, various techniques to mitigate the problem. It bought us 5 years, but we're out of time. So we're asking to build a 75 by 35 foot evidence building. The cost that we've come up with is $305,000. And that's why I'm here today, is to ask for that. So, does anybody have any questions?
Thank you. We'll open it up for questions or comments from any county board member.
I'm gonna try to, there we go.
Any questions from any county board members? Go ahead and raise your Zoom hand. I'll first call on Supervisor Eisen. Please go ahead and you can unmute your mic, Supervisor Eisen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Where will this building be constructed? I assume it's going to be on county property. I assume it be on protected law enforcement center areas, but in particular, where would it be located?
It'll be here on the campus somewhere.
Yeah, we'll be able to monitor the building right on our campus. Where it will be exactly is part of facilities, and I know Mike is giving a presentation tonight. He might be able to tell you exactly where that location might be.
Any other questions, Supervisor Eisen?
No, but thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Eisen. Next speaker, we'll call on Supervisor Shorsey, followed by Supervisor Joas. Please go ahead, Supervisor Shorsey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My two questions are related to security systems. And the first one, is it possible to install some kind of a camera system on the current building, you know, in the interim before we might build the new one? So that's one question. And then what is the security system plan for the new building? Thank you.
Okay, I think the biggest concern, I understand your concern about the security system, but because there's so much access to the building, the Butler building, the system, I don't know how much it really helps us. The district attorney has agreed to allow us to leave that evidence there. And like Kelly had said, we've been fortunate, and we'll continue to follow the process as we have. Yes, we will have security camera on the evidence garage that'll be located on our campus, and that is monitored by our corrections division.
Mm-hmm. But we can't do something for interim on the current Butler building?
We could, we certainly could. I don't know that we'd want to invest in something elaborate, but certainly we can look at something that is that's elementary and would serve a purpose. Yeah,
just a simple, so if someone went in and there was a problem, you could look at, you know, a trail camera type of thing.
Sure.
And, or, you know, see what was going on. Thank you.
The card reader does record who enters that building, so we do know who goes in and when it happens.
Thank you, Supervisor Shorsey. Next speaker is Supervisor Joas, followed by Supervisor Buck. Please go ahead, Supervisor Joas.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. How long do you anticipate the new building as proposed would take care of your storage needs? 5 years, 10, something in between? Thank you.
You know, we see this going, you know, a 20-year fix to the problem that we have. You look at when we moved into this building in 2003, we're now moving on, what, 18 years. Granted, we ran out of space, but I think as Kelly explained, if we can cycle things with the DA's office permission, I think we have a 20-year fix to where we're at.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
Supervisor. Thank you, Supervisor Joyce. Next speaker is Supervisor Buck, followed by Supervisor Gabbard. Please go ahead, Supervisor Buck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for this presentation. Couple things, I guess. Sheriff Motz, have you guys modeled this at their other counties? I guess what, Outagamie County, Brown County, do they have similar storage facilities or of this size? I guess that's my first question.
Yes, we did look at what other counties that are of like size have done. And we believe again that this is a fix to our issues that's long-term.
Thank you. And then, 18 years for holding some people's vehicles and boats and that kind of stuff. Does the county charge storage fees or anything for that stuff, I guess?
Not when it's evidence. It's our responsibility to not only store it, but maintain it if there's such as weapons or we do injunctions where under domestic abuse cases, we will have weapons that are turned into the agency and we have to go through periodically just as you would in your own home and inspect the weapons.
All right, and then one final question. A statutory change, I know we can't predict the future, but, seems like holding on to people's stuff for that period of time, is that a state issue? And do you see that changing at all by chance? And I have no further questions. Thank you very much.
No, I do not see that changing. Some of it is mandated by, a lot of it is mandated by court cases, especially when it comes to DNA retention. So I don't see that changing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Buck. Next speaker is Supervisor Gabbard, followed by Supervisor Bender. Please go ahead, Supervisor Gabbard.
Thank you. Sheriff Motz, just a few questions here on estimates, length to get this building put up. As you know, a process in the county is that it takes quite a while by the time you get the architectural and you take it out for bids and you get the building bid out and you award a bid. I think we're looking at maybe a year, unfortunately, but that's what I see. So just beware of that because we've got a past record of that. The other thing I had is the location on your campus is great to me, but when you have, as Kelly presented, the cost of what you think that would cost, depending on where it's located, we might have issues with stormwater. We might have issues with access to that building off of a parking lot. So I'm thinking there might be some more cost other than just the building. And I know you're probably aware of that, but the number that Kelly gave out sounds great to me. And I understand we have to store these items, but there's always unforeseen things. And maybe you can clear that up or Mike can speak on that. But in the past, we've had stormwater issues and all that with getting buildings put up. And I'm not sure if that would be an issue in this case or not. It was at Parkview Health Center. And then my question maybe for Kelly or for you, whichever, storage of items. When someone, and you may have answered this for Supervisor Buck, when someone is released or the sentence is done and they're on probation after their sentence, you're still storing that item? And am I understanding that if someone has a vehicle in there, a boat or a vehicle, it is your duty to keep that in working order? So when they come to get it, it is in the same condition it was when it was put in the storage unit? That's all I have.
Yeah, I'm trying to. Yeah, I mean, we return the items to the proper owner if that's what the DA wants. Some items can't be returned if it's contraband, but we had to retain it for DNA purposes. Most of the cars that come in are not in that great a shape, but we make sure that we keep them properly. I've been to Dodge County impound and theirs is outside and I've seen weeds growing up through part of it. And that's that's not really acceptable. I mean, it might be okay for them, but I don't think that's something that we want to do.
No.
And we're responsible for the property, but no, we're not required to, make sure it runs, make sure the battery is kept up. We're not required to do any of those things, but we are required to keep it in a safe environment, where it may be outside, but certainly it is safe and it is as much out of the elements as we can. The other part about where it will be located on the campus, Mike, we went through this, the facilities director, Mike Elder, and I went through this a number of years ago. So I think Mike has a good handle on where it's going to go and whether or not there's going to be any issues with access and stormwater, because we had looked at it a number of years ago. So we do have a rendering already that we will tweak a little bit. And I'm hoping that we can get the project moving quickly.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Supervisor Gabbard. Next speaker is Supervisor Bender. Please go ahead, Supervisor Bender.
Just a comment that the Sheriff's Department right now is nice enough to let the Parks Department park some of our equipment in that building. So that building will not go unutilized. It is the hopes of the Parks Department to be able to use that building when the Sheriff's Department moves out, because it is basically on the site where the Parks Department is located. It's central for the employees to get equipment out of there. So it would be ideal for the Parks Department, and it's really not ideal for the Sheriff's Department. They got to drive all the way across town to get to that. So it will basically be solving two problems. The Parks Department will get the room that we truly need. I mean, we got two oversized garages to store all the parks equipment, and the sheriffs will get his stuff on site. So if anybody's wondering if that building's going to go unutilized and get tore down like some of our other buildings do, that building has a purpose, and hopefully we can get that in the Parks Department so we can keep our equipment inside and in good shape so that we have it to last in the future.
Thank you, Supervisor Bender. So we have a few other call-ins. Supervisor Borchert, I do see your hand. So I got you in the queue, just so you know. And then just to clarify, before we go to Supervisor Nussbaum, I know that Supervisor Powers had her hand up before, and I think her hand came down. So I'll call on Supervisor Powers, followed by Supervisor Nussbaum, and then Supervisor Borchert. So please go ahead, Supervisor Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have an option tonight for a Zoom hand. I don't know where it went. I had three questions, but you answered one that Supervisor Buck asked. My other two questions were, what happens in case of a power outage to all the things in your refrigerator and in your freezer? And the second question, what happens when you go on vacation and you're out sick, or who takes care of all that? What's when you're gone? And that's the end. That's all my questions.
We have backup generators that that our freezers are plugged into to maintain that. So that's what I know of. I mean, that's runs the whole jail too. In case we do have a power outage, we have the backup generators. The other one is when I go on vacation, the lieutenant detective takes over, and we also have one designated detective that when I took over this position 2 years ago, we did a full inventory. So it's time consuming, but he's the only one that I'll hand my keys off to, and that's with the approval of the sheriff, and that falls in our accreditation process that's been approved. So he's the only one that would fill in who I turn my keys over to when I go on vacation or I'm sick.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Supervisor Powers. Next speaker is Supervisor Nussbaum, followed by Supervisor Borchert. Please go ahead, Supervisor Nussbaum.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm wondering if you ever considered vertical storage, either for the old garage or the new garage.
For like vehicles, I thought about that, but a lot of the vehicles are not intact and they're not nicely able to go up on a ramp. A lot of times they're not even, some of them aren't even on wheels anymore. We dolly them up and put them onto something to move them to where they are. So I don't think vertical storage without getting into a forklift, which then brings in more safety concerns, I don't think that's an option. For small storage, we have those shelving units that allow us to go vertical. So that's fine. But otherwise, I mean, I think we're limited on our height and how to get things up there.
Thank you, Supervisor Nussbaum. Next speaker, Supervisor Borchert. Please go ahead, Supervisor Borchert.
Thank you. He kind of got into what I was thinking too. I didn't see any car lifts in there at all. And you know what I mean by car lifts? You actually push them on and they go up and then they lock in. You're kind of getting into something you weren't planning to do, and that is you're in the warehousing now.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is a different realm of that. And I noticed the lack of commercial grade scaffolding. You know, you put pallets on, and it looked like that building, not that I've been through it or anything. And you might want to consider that in a new building, because you do gain a lot of accessibility. And if you're going to have something sitting on a rack for 16 years, you really don't care if it's on the ground or up in the air. You want to get it out of the way. So that was my thought. Supervisor Nussbaum beat me to the punch. I too can't find my Zoom hand tonight. So.
I agree. Yep.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Supervisor Borchert. And your hand worked just fine. So if you do that again in the future, it'll work just fine. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, very good. Seeing no other call-ins, we'll go ahead and conclude that portion of the agenda and presentation. Thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Sheriff Motz, for the information, the presentation.
Chuck Fari's hand was up.
Oh, it sounds like we have one more question or comment. Please go ahead, Supervisor Fari.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't have a hand to raise, so I'm using that clap one they have.
Okay, I will try to look for that.
I toured the old Butler building several years ago, and there was a separate area that was locked for the district attorney's property. Is that still the case? It was like in a big cage.
Yeah, there is an area that has some, and they're confidential records, I believe. There is a locked area, but we don't, obviously we couldn't use that for vehicles or large items, but I believe those are confidential files.
But my reference is that part of the building is secured.
Yeah.
It's locked separately from ingress, egress by anybody else. Also, this new building, would that accommodate space for the district attorney's records?
I don't know. I don't know that the district attorney would want to have those there. It's not something I've discussed with them. Certainly, if we can create some space for that, we would be willing to do so, but not a discussion that I've had with him.
My second question is, the building you're proposing is 35 by 75. That's an odd sized building. So have you considered 40 by 80?
Yeah, Mike Elder would be able to answer the dimensions. It's an approximate. He gave me a square footage, and we just used an approximate size. But certainly, it very well could be a different size, but square footage wise, it would be the same.
Yeah, it's usually more cost effective to building like 40 by 8 as an example. And my last question is the funding. Are you proposing this is coming from bonding, or are you looking at from the reserve funds?
I don't know. The finance director, Vicki Fitzgerald, would have to answer that question on where the money would be coming from.
Okay.
Thank you, Sheriff. We have our CIP plan that we did publish with the board, and this project is actually being proposed in the $5 million of bonding. We have proposed another almost $6 million of bonding of general fund balance we're using for other projects. So we have the plan in place, and this one would be bonding.
That would be part of a $5 million bond.
That would be correct at this point.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Fitzgerald. Anything further, Supervisor Farley?
No, sir. How do I get my hand back?
So very good. So I want to give you a tidbit that might work for you all, and then I want to have a backup plan for all of us. Okay. So I'll tell you the tidbit that may work for you, and then we'll have the backup plan. So first of all, at the bottom of your screen, in the middle to the right, you should see something called reactions. If you click on that, you will see, and it sounds like not everyone is seeing it, so
I don't have it.
You don't have that on the bottom that says reactions?
No.
Okay, well, and that's why we're gonna have a backup plan, okay? So what I will do with each of these presentations, and if I fail, then you're gonna remind me, but what I'm gonna try to do, we'll call on folks in succession. If I can see people waving their hand like I saw with Supervisor Borchert, I'm gonna put them down and I'll let them know after the current person is talking that I have them in the queue. But after we're done, at the end of each presentation, I will say, is there any other supervisor who would like to speak? If so, please go ahead and open your mic to try to give another opportunity, okay? And certainly if I fail to do that, just at the end of the presentation, when all have spoken, go ahead and open your mic. But that's what I'll attempt to do as our backup plan, okay?
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right, very good. Supervisor Powers?
Well, I did see the reactions and I did raise a reaction. I think I don't remember if I put up the thumbs up or the clap, but it disappeared shortly. So there, I usually have a Zoom hand and I don't have one tonight. And that reaction one does not stay on the screen very long.
And I believe you, Supervisor Powers, and the reason I had you in the queue, because at one point I could see your hand, then it went away. Then another time your hand came back and then it went away. And then another time it said yes. So yours was working intermittently, but the bottom line is, if I see your hand come up, I'm going to put you in a queue and I'm going to call on you, just like I did with Supervisor Powers before, even if your hand goes down, to clarify if you still want to speak, okay? We'll do the best we can. All right, very good. I see one other hand, Supervisor Lautenschlager. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I see that Mike Elder is on, so maybe he can answer some of Mr. Fari's or placement, some of the questions. Would that be okay?
Certainly. Director Elder, any comments in regards to the questions from Supervisor Fari, or I know there was a question about the stormwater?
A lot of those questions are going to have to be addressed when we actually sit down with the architect and the sheriff to determine the final scope and design of the building. Right now, it's anticipated to go to the northwest of the existing building. There's land over there. We've also got some areas directly to the north where the future expansion of the jail, if we would need some other pods, would go. So we've kind of got an idea on the campus on where it would go. But it's once we get into the design and we see what kind of footprint we're going to need, what kind of land's available, and then what we have to work out with the city for stormwater and everything. Some of those questions will be coming a little bit further along in the process.
Thank you, Director Elder. Thank you, Supervisor Lautenschlager. Now, Supervisor Brunn, please go ahead, Supervisor Brunn.
Yes, just a few quick comments. This is a very common problem with most police departments, as Supervisor Conrad will also tell you, always running short of evidence room. One of the things that Kelly did not really talk about much is the evidence that's collected without a suspect. Often you go to places and you collect evidence because there was a crime committed, but there's no suspect yet. That evidence sits there for quite a while. And that really isn't specifically covered by statute. But again, if you have a sexual assault or something, and you got to keep that stuff for a long time. So beyond the statutes and beyond people being incarcerated, there are some evidences that could be held indefinitely, unsolved murders, etc. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Brunn. Seeing no other hands, we'll go ahead and open it up. Is there any other county board supervisor has any other questions? If so, please just go ahead and open up your mic and ask your question. Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and close the first presentation. Once again, thank you, Kelly. Thank you, Sheriff Motz, for being here tonight, all the information and for your efforts. Greatly appreciate it. Thanks again. Okay, so we'll move on to the second presentation this evening. That's the presentation on the preliminary 2020 unaudited financial results With that, I'll call on our Finance Director, Vicki Fitzgerald. Please go ahead, Director Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Chairman Remus. I'm going to share my screen here for a presentation. Can you see that okay?
We can see the black screen, so not just yet. Now we can see
Okay.
it. We can see it now.
You can see it now. Great. Well, thank you. Tonight I'm going to present on our fiscal year 2020 preliminary unaudited financial statements. In a little introduction that, in case you don't know, our fiscal year ends on December 31st. So we're a calendar year fiscal year. And our annual audit is usually always conducted in mid-April. And so this year it'll be mid-April 2021. Results that I'm about to present to you are preliminary. So please keep that in mind, as material adjustments can still be made through mid-March. And usually most of the small departments are all set. It's more the very big departments, such as human services, may still have some revenues to accrue or so forth. But this, I would say we're within the $500,000 here for sure. Also, results presented are by fund type and also by fund. And please keep in mind that human services surpluses are returned to the undesignated general fund balance after everything is closed out. So at first, I'm just going to talk about the overall actuals versus budget by the different fund types and funds. I don't know if you remember in my training that we have governmental funds, and that's our operational fund, which is the general fund, and our special revenues fund, which is the human services fund. Right now, the general fund is looking as though we're going to have an approximate $12.2 million surplus, and I will explain that in much more detail. Human services fund is currently looking to be estimated at $6 million surplus in the end. And then again, we would be sweeping that back into the general fund balance because together they make up the governmental fund. Then we also have our enterprise funds, and there's 4 of them. There's airport, which right now it's looking to be about a $320,000 surplus over budget. Solid waste is $1.2 million surplus over budget. Parkview is looking to be about $5 million surplus. And highway right now is at a $950,000 deficit, but I will explain that more in detail as we go on in the slides. So to start out, I want to talk about the general fund. For fiscal year end 2020, currently the financial statements are looking like this. And again, we in our financial statements, we show the prior year to date, the actual year to date, the revised budget, meaning any budget, the original budget plus any budget transfers that got approved throughout the year. Then we take the year-to-date actual less, or the budget minus the year-to-date actual to get what our remaining budget is. And then we also have the percent of budget attained. As you can see, last year, we had a surplus roughly of about $3.3 million. This year, we're looking right now at about $8.8 million just for year-to-date actuals. We did have a revised budget of applying so a deficit of $3.5 million. So we built into our budget to apply $3.5 million of general fund balance. So in the end, between our year-to-date actual surplus of $8.8 million plus what we had budgeted for a deficit of 3.5, we're looking at an overall $12.2 million surplus to budget. Some of the reasons for this surplus, again, this has been a crazy year, but we allow budget carryovers from year to year. And this year we have $1.7 million requested to be carried over for the general fund. And this also includes outstanding purchase orders that are rolled forward from year to year. This will be coming before P&F for final approval on Thursday, but this is what we are proposing for the general fund. Then there's a miscellaneous unclassified department. And what that is it's a department that nothing else fits into, and it's managed by myself. It's for where we put in the tax levy and just certain revenues and expenditures. This department was under budget by $3 million. Big portion of that was revenue. I've talked in the past about the CARES Routes to Recovery grant that we received $3 million for. A lot of that was sent off to other departments, but $1.2 million of that were additional revenues for already budgeted wages. So that would be for the sheriff's office and for the Department of Human Services. That 1.2 million didn't go to them because it would come right back to the general fund. So it stayed right in the miscellaneous unclassified. The other portion that we are over is this is where investments and investment income go to, and any cost for investing for the county. And yearly we do a mark to market, which is taking our investments and marking them up to their market value versus their cost. And this year it was an increase of $1.2 million. And this was due to, in the last 3 years that I've been here, we were getting very high rates of return. And because we ladder our investments for 6 years, we're still really experiencing these high levels of investment value. So that's what that other portion of being under budget was. Next, we have the sheriff's office. They did come in at 1.6 million under budget. Reasons for that were that revenue, about 854,000 additional COVID reimbursements were given to them. Also $217,000 in additional inmate housing. And I believe this is us getting paid for housing different inmates from other counties and so forth, or awaiting prison. And with COVID, it really slowed down the process, and we ended up having some of them in-house longer than expected. For labor, they were $274,000 under, and due to overtime savings, and $518,000 excess, or under budget in fringe benefits. And with that, we HR budgets all vacant positions as if they were going to have full coverage family benefits. And a lot of times that comes in where people don't have benefits, or they take the lesser of, and that makes up a lot of that 518,000. The next reason with facilities, they came in at $1 million under budget. Labor, they experienced a $300,000 savings due to different vacancies throughout the year. One was for 6 months for a management position and about 4 custodians. Other operating expenses were under budget by $630,000. Of this, $220,000 were for utilities, and that was because, because of due to a mild weather that we've had, and also less office staff in the office due to a lot of them being quarantining and working from home during COVID. Next, there's contracted services, $200,000 savings deferred due to deferred projects from COVID and experiencing lower bids. There was a lot of bids that came in lower. For instance, even at the airport, it came in 1.5 million lower than expected, and the economy just showed us that this year. Next, we had public health. Currently, they're showing a $705,000 surplus, or being under budget. A big portion of that is revenues. They received $500,000 additional for wages they already had budgeted from the Routes to Recovery grant. They got this portion because public health keeps their own fund balance within the general fund, so it does not go into the undesignated general fund balance. So we did have to give that portion over to that piece with public health. Next, Clerk of Courts was another big one, and they came under budget by $674,000. Revenue was 212 over budget, meaning they collected more than they expected with their active collections. And a couple of years ago, they put in the state debt collections for fines and forfeitures, and they have just been doing wonderful with this to this day. Labor, they were 162,000 under budget, mostly due to positions staying vacant longer than they normally would be expected. Other operating expenses, they were 270,500 under budget, and it was mostly due to all the costs that go along with jury trials. And they had very few jury trials in 2020 because of COVID and not having people come in person. And then The remainder, about 1.5 million under budget, were the rest of the departments. There was just so many little ones, if you add it up, got to a bigger number. And then just keep in mind, the other portion of this was that we had budgeted for $3.5 million of general fund balance to be applied, and it didn't. It went completely the other way and swung the other way. Next, I'd like to talk about the Human Services Fund. For fiscal year end 2020, I have the same type of financial statement up here. It shows that last year they had a surplus of $5,000 in the end. And again, this is after we swept. This is probably a little misleading because we did sweep about $3 million back in the general fund balance last year. So that you would put that at about 3 million. This year, right now, I currently in the financial software show $5.8 million of a surplus for year-to-date actual. And Department of Human Services does estimate it might come in up to $6 million, but somewhere between 5.8 here and 6 million. Their revised budget showed that they would have a deficit of 24,000. So then the remaining budget, which is the overall surplus, is 5.875. And it breaks it down, you know, by each one here. I have a few more slides to break them down even more. Human Services put this nice pie chart together for me, and it goes by, it takes the surplus, the 5.8 million, and breaks it down by where it is to give us a visual. So labor is at 13% of that surplus that they were under budget. Travel about 5.1%. Operations 26.5%. Then they broke that down by operations. You know, they're under budget due. They estimate due to COVID, and that would be 34.2%. Unanticipated revenues, and they were saying from different federal and state sources, would be about 13.2%. And then other CARES revenues separate from the Routes to Recovery grant would be about 8%. Per Department of Human Services, based on their historical trends, it is estimated that 56.4% of the 2020 Human Services surplus is related to the pandemic. So roughly half, a little more than half of that 6 million. Reasons for their surplus. First off, revenues. They're $1.5 million over budget. Of that, 158,000 came from the CARES Routes to Recovery reimbursement grant. Another 469,000 came from additional grants and other CARES monies that wasn't Routes to Recovery. About 761,000 came from unanticipated revenues from federal and state sources. Labor was under by $770,000, and that was due to positions staying vacant longer than expected as well. Their travel was under about 300,000, and that had to do with they took home visits and moved to telehealth visits and had fewer in-person meetings. So there was so much more or less automobile allowance and so forth. Other operating expenses, that was down by 3.3 million. Some providers closed during the pandemic, so they didn't have their contracted services to pay. Consumers were able to access assistance from other sources due to COVID relief, meaning there's a lot more people out there helping people with utility problems or other needs for food and so forth that they didn't come to the county. Placements were less due to the pandemic, and overall disbursements, when they looked at a 7-year trend, were down altogether 9.1%. So then moving along from the governmental funds and general fund and human services, we're going to go to the enterprise funds. First one is airport. The airport, the way we do this, we show the original budget, what their revised budget was, actuals, encumbrances would be any purchase orders, any carryovers they're asking for in the remaining budget, getting to our percent attained of the budget. In the end, it shows that airport is about $320,000 surplus. So for them, that means they were $464,000 under budget for expenditures and 142,000 under for revenues. They obviously in the other category, we're down about 374,000 on budget, and that had to do with just not running certain programs and just being very good with their budgeting. So they came in really good. Next, we have solid waste. In solid waste, they ended up with about a $1.2 million surplus. And even though it's a negative, it's always, it's opposite of what the surpluses are, just so you know, that is a surplus, that 1.2. And that would be because $500,000 extra in fees due to more tonnage, either new customers or my private thought is that people are home a lot, so they got to clean out their house and take in their garbage, but I'm not sure. And also the other portion was $500,000 mark to market again, just like I had in the general fund with investments. We have investments with US Bank and solid waste, and they ended up also experiencing good valuation in their investments because they do also ladder out their investments. And then we have Parkview. Parkview, we had planned on applying $3 million in fund balance, but it went the other way instead. And if you notice the big changes, 3.8 million they collected in excess revenue, and that was very unanticipated. They've had nearly $2 million just for, $1 million for COVID. That was separate from any other grant we had seen elsewhere. And then they also had a $1.5 million for the CPE expenditures that they get. And that's something they get yearly, but last year they got an additional $1 million. Again, they got an additional $1 million this year. So they're very unanticipated revenues that they got as relief kind of because of what's been going on. Also, they were under in labor by $934,000. 174,000 of that was due to labor vacancies, and the other 783,000 was due to health insurance. So again, all their vacancies or in their positions are budgeted at as if the person would take a family care, and they may have not taken anything or a single coverage, which is a great change in cost. So that definitely was shown here. And then we have highway. And what I want to show with highway is they did take in 801,000 more revenues than budgeted, but right now their other operating expenditures are showing over. And what that is we're just waiting on state payments. So we need to work with them to see if we need to accrue those revenues or how we do that, being an enterprise fund. But a lot of times they do the work up front and then get reimbursed by the state. So they are showing a $950,000 deficit at this point. So in conclusion, I just wanted to give you an overview, overall, give you a feel of how we're doing. Again, this isn't wrote in stone, but it's definitely got most entries in, and besides any audit entries that the auditors may find, but we usually are pretty good on those. So again, these are preliminary material adjustments, but it's definitely a good feel of where we are and a good, good line in the sand. And then any excess fund balances, I just want to make sure you know that we are in a really healthy state before this year happened. And now we are in a healthier state. We are making plans. We put a policy in for general fund policy, and I plan to follow it. And I just want to make sure you're all on board of, knowing that it needs to be managed by policies and procedures and through the finance department with a structured plan. Because we do have other things we need to keep a strong balance for our bond ratings, but we just need to make sure that we really think and plan before we just spend. But we do have policies in place that we will be watching this and making sure we make correct choices going forward. With that, I was wondering if you had any questions.
Very good. We'll open it up for any questions from any county board supervisor. If so, go ahead and raise your Zoom hand. And I first will call on Supervisor Eisen. Please go ahead, Supervisor Eisen.
Yes, Finance Director, do we know if other counties are experiencing these kinds of surpluses with the impact of COVID-19? It appears that a sizable percentage of the surplus is attributed to less face-to-face meetings, less burden of expenses involving operation of county government. There seems to be some congressional debate on passing a $2 trillion package, and the Counties Association seems to think that we should lobby for these additional revenues for local government. Are we just a exception to the rule? We are an exception to the rule with no sales tax, and we're still coming out smelling like a rose.
Thank you. I don't know the answer for sure to other counties. I've been starting to get a feel, but I definitely could get a feeler out there to see where if they know where their surpluses are yet or not. I know that the Human Services did poll some of the other counties about how they're doing on human services, and they were doing maybe $2 to $4 million surpluses. So I think they were experiencing the same for sure there. I know some counties did not take advantage of the CARES money as much as we did. They didn't even put in for what they were allocated, much less trying to put in for more than they were allocated. So I feel that $3 million really was even more for us than some counties might have taken advantage of. But I can definitely do a poll with some of the counties and get back to you so you can have a feel for that. I'd be very curious for that as well. But at this point, I'm not real sure on that.
Well, recently, NACO and the Counties Association published a expected and forthcoming care package, rescue package that supplements this, which indicates that Winnebago County is in store for receiving in excess of $3 million.
That would be 33 million.
33 million.
Yeah, the thought makes I don't even want to tell you what the thought makes for me right now. I feel like we're very healthy right now. I know that the county exec and the Human Services director are definitely thinking of things to do with that. But I know that even this $3 million we tried to put together a mortgage assistance program. We almost spent as much advertising it than we actually did, giving it out too. So I guess I need to know more what the need is out there. I'm not seeing it as much as right now, but 2021, now that we have continued almost a year in this with COVID, maybe the lasting effects will then catch up to us as well. But I think 33 million at this point, in my opinion, is excess, major excess to me.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Eisen. Next speaker is Supervisor Gabbard, followed by Supervisor Wingren. Please go ahead, Supervisor Gabbard.
Thank you. Vicki, several things, but first of all, thank you for that really readable, understandable report. I really appreciate the detail, and yet there was good information in there. So I thank you for that.
Thank you.
Second of all, enterprises, Parkview and the airport, which I hold dearly to my heart, as you all know. Question, the 320 that is under budget for the airport, they do get to keep that, and that does go in there and reserve funds, and same with Parkview, is that correct?
Yes, I should have been more clear. When within enterprise funds, they're business type funds, meaning whatever, their fees they bring in, they keep, and it's in their fund balance. And that would be all four of them. The highway, airport, Parkview, and solid waste. And
Okay.
we do give a little bit of levy to airport and Parkview, but less and less. And I
Okay.
would say even the airport would probably be self-sufficient by now if they didn't have all the stormwater utility fees.
Right, good point. So on Parkview, they were 5 million, we'll round it off, 5 million under budget. And we were going to take 3 million from them for the 2021 budget?
For the 2020 budget.
Oh.
Yeah,
okay.
and so we didn't do that. So they're going to be very, very healthy. And again, we haven't finished all of our balance sheet yet, but I know that they were already at a $10 million fund balance before 2020.
Which is
at the
good,
end of
and
19.
they're down residents. They're down,
Yes,
say
their
44
census is-
residents. So even despite all of that happening, along with the COVID or due to COVID, they're a pretty tight ship out there. So
They are. They're doing a fabulous job. So
and they still take care of the residents, and everything is good, and we're good. So let me think. I think that was it. So thank you very much, Vicki.
Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Gabbard. Next speaker is Supervisor Wingren. Please go ahead, Supervisor Wingren. And Supervisor Wingren, you can go ahead and unmute your mic.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Vicki, thank you very much for the excellent report. This is very troublesome to me. $33 million surplus? Isn't it because we spend too little? It's because we tax too much. How can we even sit here tonight knowing this? We took too much money from the people. We have to give it back. I challenge you and the county executive and all of us to work together to figure a way to get this money back. We took too much. Why are we talking about even bonding for the sheriff's evidence building when we have a $33 million surplus? It's excessive, as you said yourself, and I think we need to do something about it, and do something about it now. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Wingren. Next speaker is Supervisor Rasmussen, followed by Supervisor Snyder. Please go ahead, Supervisor Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a few observations I made here during this report. A lot of it follows on what Supervisor Wingren just said. HS Department, $6 million over. If you recall back last fall at budget session, I put in an amendment for reducing their budget by $1.5 million based on their $3 million average. And I was told by the director and the county exec, well, the world was going to come to an end, I guess, but they came in $6 million over this time. You're right, we're taxing them too much. Another one is the CARES Act. 1.65 million of that CARES Act went toward budgeted wages. So we got to be reimbursed by the federal government for money that we are already taxed our residents for. We'll remember that at budget time. A couple other observations, rhetorical questions here I don't need answers on, just to get everybody thinking about it. A lot of that surplus money came from the CARES Act. CARES Act was supposed to be for reimbursements for COVID expenses. Why do we have all that extra money from the CARES Act? The 3.3 million that we took from the federal government, who doesn't have any money, by the way. Another one was a lot of departments had lower expenses due to labor, labor expenses were down due to vacancies. I wonder why we have so many vacancies. I know it's the way of the times that we have so many turnovers, but it seems like we have way too many vacancies, which brings the third one is operational. That I wonder if we did our mission. You know, we tax to supply or to provide services, and I wonder if we did that because of all this money left over. And yes, we had way too much left over. We need to be working on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Rasmussen. Next speaker, Supervisor Bender. Please go ahead, Supervisor Bender.
Just a comment, when we went to the legislative meeting in January, the state senators were talking about forgiving interest on delinquent property taxes. And just so everybody in the county board knows, we'll have to make everybody whole at the end of September. So if businesses, small businesses can't pay their property taxes, we could easily see $35 to $50 million in delinquent taxes. And at the end of September, we'll make checks out to the city of Oshkosh, to the state of Wisconsin, to the school system. And it seems like we have a lot of money. We got $35, $40 million. I don't know a good household that doesn't run with 3 months worth of basically capital. And that's what our budget's $170 some million a year. And we have about 3 months worth of operating expense in our reserve. I don't think we have excess amount of money. I think it's a well-managed county, and we don't have that 0.5% sales tax like the surrounding counties have. So I give the people credit for basically doing good job managing the money. And hopefully, if we do get the 33 million and we have a bunch of delinquent property tax, we will have the money to basically dole out to all the other entities, because otherwise we'll have to cash our investments in or borrow it. Our money's all invested. We don't have $35 million we can put our hand on tomorrow to write them checks out. So I think we're in good shape, and we need to make sure we stay that way, because I, for one, don't want to see a 0.5% sales tax in Winnebago County.
Thank you, Supervisor Bender. Now, I don't see any Zoom hands up, but I want to open it up and make certain, is there any other supervisor who has any comment? Please go ahead and open up their mic or wave their hand, and I'll certainly call on you. Wanted to make sure we didn't miss anyone. Is there any other county board supervisor who has any other question? Okay, seeing none, we'll go ahead and close that presentation. Thank you very much for the information and presentation, Director Fitzgerald. Greatly appreciate it. Thank you. Okay, so we have 2 other presentations this evening. The third one is the Winnebago County Facilities Department 2021 Capital Projects Report. For that, I'll call on our Director of Facilities, Director Elder, Mike Elder. Please go ahead, Director Elder.
Good evening. As I was introduced, my name is Mike Elder. I'm the Director of Facilities. And tonight, in lieu of having a presentation for you, you were all mailed out a package with our 3 projects and their descriptions and cost estimates. But I'll go over them with you tonight too. The 3 projects are our courthouse masonry repairs. That's part of a multi-building project that goes over a number of years for all of our buildings, looking at the building exteriors and fixing any kind of masonry flaws that we have found. We have the Oren King building roof replacement. And we have a project to remodel the offices for the DA's office on the 2nd and 3rd floors of the Oren King building. And like I said, each of you have had a packet mailed out to you that's much more detailed in description. So the first project is the courthouse masonry repairs. And like I said, this is a project that's related to a multi-year look at all of our buildings, finding the ones that are in most need of repairs to their masonry, exterior surfaces, and fixing those in a timely basis. This project will consist of checking and making repairs to the masonry facade, the anchor points that hold the limestone onto the building structure, replacing some damaged masonry pieces, and replacing the damaged or missing mortar between the pieces. For those of you that are new to the board, the courthouse was built in 1938, and really that building has had minimal need for repairs for most of its life. The biggest repairs that we've done recently was replacing its roof about 5-6 years ago, and just last year when we replaced the windows. Other than that, that building has withstood the test of time and not really needed much work at all. The courthouse is a historically listed national landmark. So these repairs are going to have to be done in accordance with preservation guidelines, which means that we have to be a little bit more careful and a little more selective in how we do the work. So during the summer of 2020, last summer, we did an inspection of the building and found some areas that really needed to be repaired. If you walk into or around the building, you'll notice the lower part of the building is really in good shape. The joints are tight, there's minimal deterioration, but where we found the damage was up higher, up on the 4th, 5th levels of the building and up on the penthouse sides. So there's numerous joints that are missing some mortar. Several of the anchor points over the last 80+ years have rusted and they're deteriorating. So what we're going to be doing with this project is, you've probably noticed the dirt on the building. So the entire exterior surface of the building will be cleaned. I know I've talked to a few of you when we did the courthouse security addition. We were prevented from removing the rust on the limestone because that was considered aesthetically, historically significant. But we do get to remove the dirt from the building. So we will be cleaning the entire exterior of the building. We need to replace about 90 square feet of damaged stone. We need to repair and patch about 450 square feet of damaged stone. And then there's about 14,000 linear feet of mortar that we need to repair, replace, and touch up to maintain the watertight integrity. Now, the total cost of this project is estimated to be about $875,000. And roughly a third of that cost is the cost to clean the building and then to actually erect and have the necessary staging around the building to be working on 5 stories of the building. We're hoping to get this done all over summer this year. We've got the documents and everything ready to go out for bid should this project be approved to go forward. So we'll be looking for approval probably at the April County Board meeting. Does anybody have any questions with this one, or we can hold them until the end of my presentation?
If we could hold questions and then we'll have questions at the end after you reviewed all 3.
Okay.
Okay. Please go ahead.
The next project that we've got is the replacement of the Oren King building roof. That roof is at least 26 years old. The building was built in 1960, and I believe this is the second roof that we have on the building. The records that we've got prior to 1998 are really scarce. I can't find any record of the roof being replaced. I do know that we had a major remodeling of the building in 1995, and the roof replacement was not part of that. So my estimate right now is that that roof is probably at least 26 years old. And from what I can tell, our practice was to purchase and have installed 20-year roofs. So that roof is pretty much close to the end of its life, if not exceeding to it. The roof, the style of the roof is what's called a fully adhered rubber membrane, which just means we have insulation on top of the roof structure, and then a rubber membrane is glued down on top of the insulation. And there's nothing to protect the rubber membrane from the weather or from any of the ultraviolet light that we get during the day. And it's this ultraviolet light and the weather that really causes the roof to age and weather. With the packet that you got, you will see that there was an inspection report done in 2017. At that time, we fixed those defects that they found, but it's becoming a continual issue that we have to have people up there to patch the roof. In 2007, we did some major repairs to the roof membrane. What was interesting was the rubber itself had shrunk so much that it was actually pulled away from the insulation for about 30 feet away from the edges of the roof. And we managed to repair that and extend the life of the roof from 2007, when we had planned on replacing it, to now. And as you can see, you know, that report is just indicative of the defects that we're finding as we go up there and we inspect the roof periodically. In there, you can see there were some smaller areas of raised roofing. They look like little mounds, little hills. Those have gotten worse, and what that's an indication of is that there's water getting through the membrane and soaking the insulation, which then expands. So we are getting water through the membrane. It's not obvious where it's coming from. And what we can attribute that to is that the membrane is just wearing out. So this project will strip off the old roof and all the old insulation. We'll inspect the understructure of the roof, make repairs that we need to that, to the understructure, and then install new insulation to the new energy efficiency requirements, and install a new rubber membrane. And the estimated cost for this project would be $227,000. The third project that we've got is the district attorney's office and remodel and update. And the district attorney used to be in the beach building. In 2011, when we bought the Otter Street building, we managed to move planning and zoning, finance, purchasing out of the King building and open up space for the district attorney to leave leased space and be brought back into county-owned property. And they were moved in, and there was minimal remodeling done for their offices. This project will take into account how they're doing their operations, what they need to be successful in serving the needs of the courts and their staffing. And what they are proposing right now is that we create a new conference room on the 3rd floor. That building is a little light on having conference rooms for them. The reception office area on the 2nd floor would be reconfigured, and that was set up basically for planning and zoning to deal with the public. And then, due to the age of the building and the fact that we haven't done any remodeling, and what we're doing right now would be considered significant enough that we now have to bring some of the areas up to code in the building. So some of the doors will have to be changed. Some of the exiting routes may need to be modified a little bit. So it's going to increase the costs rather than just, doing the conference room and the remodeling of the reception area. And then both floors would be completely painted out and the carpeting replaced on both floors. We'd install card access on their, I guess you'd call them their perimeter doors that would separate the public areas from the staff areas, which they don't have right now. The doors are locked, so it is a little bit difficult to get through with their staff. And we've done some preliminary design work with this, and we've come up with an estimate of approximately $190,000 to do this work. And those are the 3 projects that I'm bringing forward to you tonight to discuss and answer questions. And then we would be bringing forward funding requests at probably the April board meeting.
Very good.
And I will take any questions.
Very good. We'll open up for questions. I know that Supervisor Shorsey had her hand up previously, so I'll give her the first opportunity to speak. And then that'll be followed by Supervisor Eisen. Any other supervisor, please go ahead and raise your Zoom hand and we'll call on you in succession. Please go ahead, Supervisor Shorsey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have no question at this time. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Supervisor Shorsey. Next, I'll call on Supervisor Eisen, followed by Supervisor Buck. Please go ahead, Supervisor Eisen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm really excited. I've been on this board for over 15 years, and I'm really excited by Mr. Elder's presentation. And the reason I'm excited is that it fulfills a lot of the goals and ideas that I have had and been working with. In particular, the repairs to the courthouse, including the refacing of the exterior. Every time I come to a county board meeting at the courthouse, I look at the building and I see the work that we're doing, and I'm saying, gee, this is a historical building. It ought to look a little bit nicer than seeing blue streaks dripping down the sides. And his efforts to accomplish the tuck pointing and the refacing is really exciting. I'm also very impressed by the schedule over the 5-year plan for all the other buildings that the facilities department is going to be dealing with. And it's very well laid out. It's something that is a lot of thought has been given to it. And it's something which is going to be of great value for the county going forward. And that is also, to reiterate this, in respect to the roofing projects. There's 5 years of roofs that are lined up to be dealt with, so that the costs of these will be distributed over a space of time, and will be able to preserve the integrity of these buildings. Now, the third and last thing that I have to make a comment about is a real find and a real kudos to Mr. Elder for his forward thinking and leadership in stealing away the solid waste department's operation manager, Mr. Carl Pertsteiner. It's a sad day for the solid waste department, but it's a real plus both for the facilities department and Winnebago County, because this man, we stole him away from Outagamie County's solid waste organization, and he's been just super over the last decade. And he's a young guy, and he's got probably another 15 or 20 years to give to Winnebago County. And talk about success in management. I think we've got a real good find in our facilities director, Mr. Elder. And I think I'll quit at that.
Thank you, Supervisor Eisen. Next, I'll call on Supervisor Buck. Please go ahead, Supervisor Buck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. That's a hard act to follow, Supervisor Eisen. I'll keep my comments brief. Mike, I guess you mentioned scaffolding for the the masonry repair program here, I guess, we replaced all the windows with boom lifts. Everything can be reached with the 135-foot lift. I guess I'm just questioning why we need to erect scaffolding around the building or parts of the building. That's my first question.
The architect that I had talked to people who do the restoration, and they felt that they would be safer and be more stable to have scaffolding. That could change when it goes out for bid and people actually put money against what they're saying. So they may find that it's cheaper or more effective to use the lifts. But what we did find was people were not quite so gentle with the lifts, and they did bang into the building a little bit. Because they swayed at 135 feet.
Yeah, gotcha. It would be a lot safer on a lift, but that's my opinion. And then my next question, I guess with the roof projects, yeah, great job putting this together. Who does this for you, I guess, and you bring in a third-party consultant, or what's a process look like for that?
What we do is we use whatever avenues we can to help us get information. With the King building, we did have I think it was Great Lakes Roofing come in and give us a roof inspection for us. We do talk to roofing experts to help us come up with the plan.
Gotcha. Yeah, I guess it'd be a little concerning if you have a roofing company do your estimate and then say you need a new roof. That I think there's consulting firms out there that does that work as well as probably maybe a little more unbiased. But it seems like you're doing a good job. And then my next question, any talk about any solar panels on any of these roofs? I know we've talked about it in the past. Any plans or any talk about that? I know what has been talked about in the past is, we would think about doing it when we replace the roofs on buildings. Any talks or thoughts or anything on that, Mike?
I've looked at it. And what I can't quite break even yet is the cost savings that we'd have with having the solar panels on our roof and the initial cost to do it. I haven't quite gotten the break-even point being favorable, or at least a break-even for us to not lose money on it. I think I've gotten it down to about 26 years for us to recover the costs to install. But what I'm getting is it's about a 25-year life expectancy for the solar panels. I'm hoping that in the very near future, they've got some new technology out there that may bring down this cost some more for us. But we're always looking at that. And I'm hoping, like as Mr. Eisen said, now that I've got Kurt on board, maybe we can spend a little bit more time looking at some of these energy efficiency type projects that we could implement.
Very nicely done, Mike. Thank you very much, and looking forward to seeing the courthouse masonry in better shape than it is. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Buck. Now, I don't see any other hands raised, so I'm going to open it up to County Board Supervisors. Anyone that wasn't able to raise their hand, any county supervisor, please go ahead and open up your mic if you have any questions for Director Elder. Any other County Board Supervisor with any other questions or comments? Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close that presentation. Thank you, Director Elder, for your presentation, information, and certainly for all your efforts. Greatly appreciate it. Have a good
Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we have one other presentation this evening, and that's a presentation in regards to Grumman Boat Landing Master Plan Report. I'll call on our acting Parks Director, Vicki Redlin, to introduce our presenter. Please go ahead, Acting Director Redlin.
Thank you. This is a project that was brought to our attention in early 2020 from neighbors in the area of the boat landing. They had a safety concern. That concern was there were too many people with their boats. backing up unsafely while launching and crossing the entire parking lot in reverse. There is an immediate solution to this safety issue, but we wanted to make sure that we had everything taken into account. So we went ahead and put together a master plan. So right now, what you're going to be seeing is the concept design for the master plan, and we will have some cost estimates as well. We did have a public input on this. So we've taken a survey, we've had a public input Zoom meeting, and we've added and subtracted a few things from the plan. And here to present it is Bruce Morrow from Aries Associates. So if you can let Bruce take it away, he can put the map up on the screen and let us see what he's come up with.
Very good. We'll work to make him a co-host. Okay, Mr. Morrow, you should be all set to share your screen. Very good. We can see it well.
On mic. Am I unmuted now?
We can hear you well, and we can
Okay.
also see your screen.
All right. I was having problems unmuting. Well, thank you for your time today. This is a exciting project. We've had a lot of public input, as Vicki mentioned. So this is the Grumman boat launch. This is the master plan. For those of you who aren't familiar with this site, approximately today, it's about the top bay of parking here is the existing boat launch roughly. So boats come in to the site, they turn around down here, they pull back up, they pull into a spot, and then they have to back down this lot to pick up the boat. That's the problem Vicki was mentioning before. So we were challenged with the ways to end that problem. They also wanted to increase the number of boats parking that was there, provide some car parking, provide some other site amenities that we'll get into, and also increase the number of boat launch areas. So right now, originally there are 65 boat stalls. And with our realignment of this parking lot and adding the extra bay, we're now at 124 boats. So as cars come in the site, they turn down here. There's an area they can prep off to the side. They can stop and prep their boat. Then they drive along the road here and they can pay at their informational kiosks and wait their turn to get in here. This is a 100-foot radius, which we've measured out, and this works well for turning boats around. They can back their stalls in. Today, the ramps are about 24 feet apart for a dual boat lane. We're widening those to 32 feet apart, so boats can get in there easier. We've added 2 stalls. We're leaving the existing wall here. We're tearing out an existing wall approximately here to add 2 more stalls or launches. Also feature with the boat launch that we had before is that there's still a lot of wave action here that was causing problems. So we extended the breakwater. That's what this is shown out here. This is an extended breakwater. Right today it ends about here. So we're extending the breakwater out here. There's a navigation light, but this helps protect the boats so the boats can get in without the wave action that exists today. There is a trail out there so people can fish. Currently people use this to fish. There's no real trail out there, but today we're putting a trail out there. In the lot itself, we have widened the parking stalls some. They were 10 feet wide. The decision was made to make them 11 so we could get more boat parking in. So we have, it's a lot easier circulation. A car that now parks here can just go around and pick their boat up. We had some wetlands that we had to avoid. These are these lighter blue areas. So we couldn't really extend much farther with our boat launch. Our parking, there's one minor wetland here. Talking to the wetland specialist, this is really a low quality wetland. It shouldn't be a problem to fill it in. It's basically a leftover ditch. The neighbor to the south was a little, we've met with them several times. They've been involved and they were a little concerned about the screening. So we added some extra screening around their lot here for them. And there is some existing screening here. We also added some other trees in this area. We had to take some trees out from this area. Most of them, the trees that we're taking out are ash trees that are in the site. There are some others, but the majority of them are ash. We added a restroom building here. This would be a vault toilet. There is no water or sanitary here, so this would be a vault style toilet building, restroom building. This would be an open air shelter for people to use if they wanted to have a picnic here. You can see there's a kayak launch. This would be handicap accessible kayak launch. We also provide a pier along the side here so people can come out on this floating dock and fish. They could also be dropped off on their boat. So someone can come up here and drop someone off on their boat to take their picnic basket or whatever out while they wait in line to launch, to load up their boat. We added stormwater management. There's no stormwater treatment today on the lot, so we added that in. There's currently a problem of, sounds like high school kids mainly running their cars through the ditches to see who can get the muddiest truck. So we try to address that with a fence along the side of the split rail, kind of native, natural looking fence along the side there to help solve that problem. We have lights in the parking lot. There's some money allocated for cameras that would be used there to help with safety. There's been some concerns about people partying out here on the site. So we have some camera. We do not have Wi-Fi access right now to that site. And I think those are the major features. Oh, we added a 7-car parking lot. Before, originally there were no car parking spots. We added a few of those for other uses. And so that's kind of how the boat launch all works out. Do you want to go into cost, Vicky, or how do you want to handle the cost?
Unless there's any questions about the design so far, yeah, you can go into the cost estimates on what we're looking at.
Why don't we go ahead into the cost and then we'll open it up after that for any questions for either the space plans and the cost afterward.
So this is an early phase, so we have a contingency built in. The total cost around for this is around $1.8 million. We have it kind of broken down into phases of kind of the general overhead, the erosion control mobilization. That's about $133,000. Site improvements, which are clearing and grubbing all the concrete, the pavement, lighting, that's $727,000. The boat launches itself and repair are around $200,000. The pier and dock system is $90,000. Buildings and kiosks, that's a kiosk, open air shelter, vault toilet, $125,000. And then the breakwater improvements are about $111,000. Some electrical provisions. There is electrical out there, but the lighting system and security cameras, it's $82,000. Stormwater management, most of this is the treatment areas, it's $62,000. That's overall site restoration and landscaping at $57,000. So that puts us at the 1.8 with contingency.
Very good. We'll open it up for questions about the space plans or any questions in regards to the cost. Any county board supervisor has any questions about in regards to the plans? I'll call first on Supervisor Shorsey. Please go ahead, Supervisor Shorsey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. One, I understand that this project has not been included in the capital improvement plan for this year, this fiscal year. So
Not yet.
that is a concern of mine. And, to jump the process is a problem, I believe, for us. And it also sets a precedent that we probably don't want to set with other directors and leaders in the county. So I would like to ask Vicki Fitzgerald to speak to this from a capital budget perspective.
Please go ahead, Director Fitzgerald.
Thank you, Supervisor Shorsey. We do have a 5-year CIP plan, and we go through this process every year. And I start this months and months during budget season, ask for the CIP plan. I've been here 3 years and I have not heard of this project until probably late June, and I just heard about $24,000 cost. This, I'm concerned that this is not on the CIP plan because we don't only plan the monies, but we're planning resources, the staffing, the time, and the priority of the whole county, not just one department. And with that, I worry even for parks right now. We're still waiting on a director. And what many of you don't know is we have 2 budget transfers coming to PNF and board this month for a $1.6 million expo project that is on the CIP plan, and then also a $200,000 mower. This upgrade of the expo and stormwater and what have you is going to be a lot to manage. And again, it's 1.6 million. The other thing with this is the boat landing has their own fund balance. And I don't know if you all know that. So whatever fees they receive, which is roughly $120,000 to $130,000 a year, whatever they receive in the fees for that, the usage goes into their fund, and they use that for upgrades. Currently, it looks like at year end for 2020, they're going to have about $169,000 in that fund. I am now hearing that this project, I first heard 24,000, then I heard 200,000, now 1.8 million. I heard there is some DNR funding. They don't know if it's going to be 50-50, which would still be $900,000 for us, or 80-20. It sounds like we're more leaning towards 50-50. I don't feel this project has been fully vetted, and I'm just hearing about it and it's not on the plan. And I did believe I heard Vicki Redlin in the beginning say that there is a possible mitigation they can do for the safety concerns so we can get this through the process. I'm not sure, but those are some of my concerns. And I know not everybody agrees with those, but I really feel like if we don't follow our plans, why are we planning as a county? How do we prioritize the county's work and the resources? Thank you for asking.
Thank you, Vicki. And as I just want to make a point that I'm not saying I'm opposed to the project. I think that has yet to be seen, because this is the first we've heard of it. But I am very concerned that we stick to our management process of going through the CIP plan and that whole vetting process with this project. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Shorsey. Next speaker is Supervisor Eisen, followed by Supervisor Lautenschlager. Please go ahead, Supervisor Eisen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. $1.8 million for a boat launch is a real sticker shock. It's almost as much a sticker shock to me as when the plumber told me it'd cost me $16,000 to replace my bathtub. But anyway, my observation or my impression is that this is too expensive. The question I would have is, what is our return for the investment? What is the summary of the usage of this boat launch? How many boats enter the lake from this port each week? How long is the season for the usage of that entryway? $130,000 in fees sounds like a lot of money, but $1.8 million is over 10 times that amount. I think we need a lot of answers. It's nice to present an idea, but I think this is probably something that should be vetted out in the Parks Committee before it's ready for prime time.
Thank you, Supervisor Eisen. Next, I will call on Supervisor Lautenschlager, followed by Supervisor Bender. Please go ahead, Supervisor Lautenschlager.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. For one thing, this is our busiest boat launch in the county. And the neighbors brought this to our attention because it's a safety issue on taking the boats and backing them up, whatever. This plan to me is kind of like a win-win situation because we improve the safety issues of the boat launch. Plus, we're adding more boat parking spots, which will increase our revenue because every boat that launches out there has to pay. We're adding a kiosk out there that they can now use credit card. They can pay right there on the spot. So I think by adding more space and making this more safe, we are it's a win-win because we're going to get more revenue. This isn't something that we're just going to spend money on and get no return on, because we will get return on this. Thank you. You're muted, Shiloh.
We have a number of other individuals with Collins and questions. Supervisor Bender will be next. I believe Supervisor Konecki was trying to call in. So I just wanted Supervisor Konecki to let you know that I do have you in the queue. So next speaker is Supervisor Bender, followed by Supervisor Gabbard.
Just for reference, we're asking for 20% of the $1.8 million. We have to have that money in order to apply for the grant. If we don't get the grant, we won't be doing the revamping of the boat launch. And on the average year, the boat launch, between the buoys and the maintenance on the boat launches, we spend about $130,000 of boat launching funds. The fund that has $169,000 in, we require to keep $120,000 in there so we have money for the following year. We, as a Parks Department, do not have to put the buoys in. We could stop putting the buoys in next year and save $80,000 a year. It's not a requirement. We do it because the people feel safer. We got the dam, we got some other areas that could be hazardous for boaters. But Outagamie County doesn't put any buoys in. Fond du Lac County doesn't put any buoys in. Those buoys cost us around $80,000 a year. You know, there's no way that we can get the money from the boat fees to redo these boat landings. And the one in Butamore off of Leonard's Point, that one there's no parking there on Saturday. Can you imagine loading your boat up with your family and now you want to go boating and you get there's no place to park your trailer. Now you have to go basically to the town of Armrow, or you got to drive into the city of Oshkosh. And the same with this boat landing. They go out there, they work hard all week. They take their family, they want to go boating. It's full. You can't get a spot there on a Saturday at 11 o'clock. You might as well forget it because there's no parking stalls there. The neighbors will tell you that. And you know, we just got done saying we took all this money from them that we didn't need, and now we're not going to give them back something. We're asking for maybe $300,000, and the rest of the money we'd like to give from the DNR. And we can't apply for the grant unless the county board gives it to us. So I think it's like a win-win situation, or else we could maybe just eliminate the buoys, and in 2 years we can fund it ourselves. But then if somebody gets killed on the lake because they hit a reef or a bunch of rocks, then everybody's gonna say, well, why'd you take the buoys out? Well, we can't have our cake and eat it too. Either we basically fund the boat landings, not the maintenance on them, but the rebuilding where the people need more. The town of Algoma and the town of Armrow, they've grown. The boat landing isn't big enough to support them no more. So if we don't do this for the people, I don't know what we expect, that they pay taxes. I heard people say today, we got way too much money in the reserve fund. And now they're going to tell us that we can't basically apply for a grant. We're asking for about $300,000. The rest of it will be DNR funding to make somebody where they can go boating on a Saturday and have a place to park their boat and trailer. I truly hope the county board supports this.
Thank you, Supervisor Bender. Before we go to the next speaker, I just wanted to let Supervisor Powers and Supervisor Safari know that I have seen your hands up, so I do have you both in the queue. So the next speaker is Supervisor Gabbard, followed by Supervisor Konecki. Please go ahead, Supervisor Gabbard.
Thank you, Chairman Ramos. Two perspectives. I'll give you a perspective from a boat. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you speaking.
Okay.
We can hear you.
Perspective from a boater's perspective here. There's many boat landings people use in the city and over by Samers Bay. And yes, they do become full. But my point here is you have a lot of fishing tournaments that take place, and the expansion of this would help the fishing tournament guys when they launch their boats. But on the caveat of this, you've got 62 or 64 spaces right now. So you're going to double that. And you have neighbors on Grumman Lane who live on the lake and pay property taxes and have to go down Grumman Lane to get to their places of residency. And you're going to increase this twofold. So the traffic is going to be twofold. So I know you're talking about the boaters and them being able to launch their boats, but you have to take in perspective that you're doubling the parking in this boat launch. And you're going to put some pretty, I would say, intense lighting in there. And a lot of things are going to change with the riprap and all of that. And I understand all this. But always remember, when you double the size of something like this, you double the traffic, you double the problems. I know that they said they thought some of the neighbors thought there was a safety issue, but I don't know if the safety issue gets resolved about spending $1.8 million. There are other boat launches. Those of us that trailer boats, we do go to specific boat launches. We're able to get onto the lake system. Sometimes it's crowded, sometimes it isn't, but it's the part of trailering a boat that you have to accept that. So my point here is, and as Vicki mentioned, this isn't in the capital program. I don't know that we can get the funding from the DNR. I know there's money available because I have contacted one of our state reps, and one of her aides gave me a bunch of links to the DNR, and I know there's money available for boat launches and boat launch approval grants. So I'm wondering, we have to invest money and then apply for the grant. That seems kind of backwards to me, but I'm really not thinking we need to do 1.8 million to resolve a safety feature. If you didn't add more parking stalls, you could pave the area where you wanted to put those car parking lots, and you could get the safety figured out. So I think this requires a lot more thought. I'm not determined whether I would vote yes or no for this, but I think we need to spend a little more time and get this laid out and make sure all neighbors are not affected by the lights and the traffic more so than they are already, because actually they're taxpayers in the county, so they should be thought about when this gets put together. And I guess I'd like to know more about the grant, either if Ayers, Mr. Morrow, you would know something about that, or Vicki could put something into that about how we go about getting this money. And realize too, the county residents usually buy the permit for 1 to 3 years. So they use the boat launches and they don't pay any extra. So it would be just the people I would think that are up here on vacation or are in a tournament that would be paying at the kiosk. So I don't think you're going to get that much more revenue at that boat landing. So if Vicky or Mr. Morrow could answer the question about 50-50 from the DNR, I'd like to know about that, please. That's all I have.
Okay. I had a conversation with the DNR grant specialist just this afternoon. And just to make sure that I had all my ducks in a row and can explain this. Yes, there are many grants available. If we wanted to go for the entire amount of the 1.8 million, we would have to have at least 50% that we would have approved with a resolution stating that we have that money and that we will hold that money for the duration of the project. And then we can apply for the grant. We don't have to have the money when we apply for the grant, but we have to have a resolution stating we're going to get it. That being said, there is an opportunity to get 80-20. There are very few of those that are given out. What the DNR grant person told me was that we would be best served by planning that we would get 50-50. And, if we get 80-20, that would be great. She said, right now, they do have a lot of people applying for these grants. And she said lately they have been stingy on the 80-20s. If we went for something that was a larger amount, any grants over $250,000 has to go for a 14-day review by the State Finance Committee. So that takes it a little bit longer. And that also, draws out the whole process. What she recommended we do is how we initially planned to do this, and was to do it in phases. That way, when you go for the first phase, you don't have to have that amount of money set aside. You would only have to have it for, say, if we did the parking lot first, then we could apply for that amount, and then we would only have to have the 50-50 for that smaller amount and then go from there. So there are two different types of those grants, and this would be the waterways grant. And they do apply to improvements. There is also a lot of permitting that goes along with that. So that would also take some time. But if we were to go for a larger amount, we would have to have a grant in June 1st or September 1st. And as I said, both of those, she said we would have to have some sort of guarantee that we've got our portion of the money, and then we can apply for the grant.
Very good. That answered my questions on that part of it. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Very good. Thank you, Supervisor Gabbard. Just so everyone's on the same page with who's in the queue for call-ins. Next, we'll have Supervisor Konecki, followed by Supervisor Nussbaum. Then we'll have Supervisor Powers, Supervisor Fari after that, and then Supervisor Rasmussen. Just wanted to make sure all those who are waiting to speak know their position in the queue. So next, I'll call on Supervisor Konecki. Please go ahead, Supervisor Konecki.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman Ramos. I was shot too by the $1.8 million cost, but if you look at all the amenities, all the new things, it kind of helps swallow that number. And I'm hoping that we can go forward with this, or maybe cut the cost a little bit, and of course get some DNR money involved here. I hate to see this fall apart completely, but I'd like to see at least just about all the things that were mentioned on the improvements. To me, they're justified. The dollar cost shocks me, and I shouldn't be shocked anymore nowadays, but I'd like to see going forward with this. Maybe we can cut the cost someplace along the line, but I'm willing to listen to what more supervisors have to say. That's my input.
Thank you, Supervisor Konecki. Next speaker is Supervisor Nussbaum, followed by Supervisor Powers. Please go ahead, Supervisor Nussbaum.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The backing up isn't the only safety problem down there. It's people parking on the grass and parking along the, and I'm against the riprap project because I've never seen waves too big that I couldn't launch there. And I fish on the windiest days because that's when the fish bite the best for me. So I'm against that riprap project, and I think that would cut a little bit of the cost off of it. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Nussbaum. Next speaker is Supervisor Powers, followed by Supervisor Fari. Please go ahead, Supervisor Powers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm concerned, just have a couple of questions. That one water area under the parking lot that you called a ditch, or said it was basically a ditch, I think you said. I'm wondering, are there any laws, either state laws or federal laws, revolving around covering up or destroying natural wetlands? I was concerned about that, and that's the extent of my question.
Acting Director Redlin or Mr. Morrow?
I'll let Bruce answer that, but he needs to unmute himself.
Please go ahead.
Yep. There are rules and regulations about that. First of all, the quality of wetland can make a difference. Typically, there's a 10,000 square foot limit, and that's well under that number of that. And then the DNR person who actually reviews it can make a determination if that's an issue or not. But it is a permissible use to do that for that smaller area.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything further, Supervisor Powers?
Nope, that answered my question. Thank you very much, sir.
Very good. Thank you. Next speaker is Supervisor Fari, followed by Supervisor Rasmussen. Please go ahead, Supervisor Fari.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Vicky, you said you had a public hearing on this. Now I should advise that all the property adjacent to this is in the town of Inland. So the residents you were referring to, did they comment at the public hearing, and what were their opinions?
Yes, I'm sure you're probably familiar with a couple of the names if I rattled them off, but yes, all of the residents that are on the Grumman Lane portion, they all were there. They all commented. They all like the plan. They had nothing but good things to say about it, which is kind of a first in my experience for a public hearing. But we also got a lot of feedback from our online survey. And for the most part, all of the comments were good. A couple of people did have some, small things that they wanted to add here and there. But for the most part, everybody seemed pleased with the design.
Were there any concerns raised about the lighting?
No, because what we were planning on doing is we're going to look at the LED, and those with their different diodes, you can focus those so you're not shining lights in people's windows. And the people that are right on the end there, I think his name is Joe, he and his wife said they don't really have an issue with that because the lights will be farther over where the big grassy area is. So they probably wouldn't notice too much because we were going to be focusing those straight down. If you're familiar with the lights that we put in at the park, at the county park, be similar to that. They're not spotlights, they're down lights.
You should also remember that this is a concept level design. So a lot of this stuff is not fully vetted out. This is a design that's enough to get the permit done and get some sort of rough general cost so we can provide for the grant. So items can be changed, it's not fully vetted yet. And there's a next phase, it would have to be the engineering aspect of it. And you can control lights and make modifications at that time. But that's kind of the phase where this is. And the idea was to go as far as you need to go, but not farther at this point to get the funding.
In addition to that, obviously you're using the town of Inland Road to access this boat landing. And of course, we certainly have and do accept the traffic on there now to provide that service using the county boat landing. However, if you're going to double the traffic and the capacity, is there any issues that would address the town road expenses and the additional expenses that they would incur?
We have not talked about that. I'm assuming that highway department does your maintenance. So I could find out from Ray what that would be. You know, as to doubling it, I don't know if we would actually double it every day, but the potential is there.
Obvious question, if you put more traffic on a road, you have more repairs on the road to maintain it because of the increased traffic. That would be a concern. The other thing is in regard to that breakwater, I don't know who's designing that or if you're going to the DNR, but are you aware that the Land Water Conservation Department of this county, just down the end of the hall there from you, designs and does that kind of work? In fact,
Yep.
we do a lot of it.
Yep, we've talked to Chad.
Okay, what do you say?
He said, let me know when the concept design gets closer to approval and I will talk with you then.
Okay, all right. That's good. That's about all I have. I do share concerns raised about because I believe I had a discussion with Rob about this a year ago, and my impression was this was 3-4 years out. So I assume if he was correct, it's been moved up substantially, and this ties in with the report that we get for, you know, cost estimates for projects during the next 5 years. So I also have a little bit of a concern there also, but if I understand, I want to clarify this grant thing because that seems to be a little ambiguous. The DNR is saying that we have to upfront 50% of the money, start the project, and then they will reimburse us for the other 50%? Is that correct?
Basically, yes.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Fari. Next speaker is Supervisor Rasmussen, followed by Supervisor Buck. Please go ahead, Supervisor Rasmussen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A question for Vicki Redlin. In the beginning, you said you had a temporary plan in place for helping this out. Could you tell us what that is, what that will do, and what the cost of that is? Thanks.
Well, what we could do in the meantime to alleviate the backing up issue is where you can see on the map, there's a grassy area where I think we were going to have where there was a pullout for taking stuff out of your boat, or I don't remember what the term was we have on it. But we would take that area and we would gravel it in to make a turnaround so that people who are coming out, they can turn around then and go back the way they need to go instead of going backwards. Tom McGinnis, our parks manager, talked to the highway department. They gave us an estimate of about $15,000 if they do it. We could probably do it in-house, but we'd have to rent one of their trucks. And then it would be about $12,000. And then when we got to the point where we would be paving that, we would use that gravel for a base and then pave over that section.
So you have a plan in place that would take care of the timing here for engineering to get done more precise and for the procedures that are needed for the CIP plan and such, correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Rasmussen. Next speaker is Supervisor Buck, followed by Supervisor Shorsey. Please go ahead, Supervisor Buck.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Agree with what a lot of my colleagues have said here. I guess a question for Vicki. When's like the drop down? When's the date that we have to make a decision on this, Vicki, to approve this or deny this?
Well, they do grant cycles every year, and there's a set amount in each of those years. So for a larger amount grant, if we're looking for more than 250,000, we would have to apply by September 1st. However, there are 3 other grant cycles for the lower value grants. And those, I believe there's 4 different times a year: January, May, August, and then the end of November, they have another one. So there are opportunities every year to go for this. So really, they ask that you have all of your ducks in a row, your permits, your engineering and all that stuff ready to go, as well as your earnest money, and then you apply for the grant.
Gotcha. Yeah, I agree with Supervisor Shorsey on the process of it and that kind of stuff. I guess I would just invite the County Board Supervisors. Seems like we have some time here, and we're going to get into fishing season and boating season. I guess I just invite all you guys to come down there and see what's going on down there. As Supervisor Nussbaum said, it's busy down there, and we have a gem in Lake Winnebago, and this ability to have more access for the public to go down there and enjoy this, I think would be a good thing. Yeah, it's a great boat launch, but yeah, it's just not enough room right now, and hopefully we get some more information on this, and hopefully we can move forward at some point. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Buck. Next speaker is Supervisor Shorsey, followed by Supervisor Eisen. Please go ahead, Supervisor Shorsey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My apologies, I do get a little anal about process, but I still think it's very important for us to be thinking about that, because if we bypass the process, we are going to set a precedent that we may not want to live with. A couple questions, and one kind of bothered me a bit was the fact that we held a public hearing on a project that had not even been, the concept had not even been approved. And whose authority was necessary to have that public forum? Because again, when we have a public forum, so this is a project that's not on the list, we have a public forum, so that gives people who are coming to those forums, the idea that it is going to be a county priority. So I think I just see the cart before the horse here, and it's very concerning to me that, and maybe the council could clarify who would have that authority, to have a public forum that is Winnebago County, representing Winnebago County. So that's one big question. And the other question I had is if the heirs representative would explain how they get paid and how much they would get paid for a project as presented. And then I would just like to underscore once again, we do have a new director who is going to be announced very soon. And that I'm concerned too that we're moving forward with such a big project without that person being in place and being able to lead the charge. So thank you.
Thank you. I'll call on Acting Director Redlin in regards to the question about the public hearing or comments period.
Well, and that was kind of set up when Rob was still here. Normally when we do any kind of planning or concept planning, we do a public input. And that's what this was, a public input. Basically because in the designing phase, you want to get as much input from the public who uses the facility as you can. So, I guess there's probably a difference between public hearing and public input meeting, but technically it was a meeting that we held for people to basically get the same presentation that you just got and to give us their feedback. I don't know if that's something that is has specific rules as to who can say when it happens and when it doesn't. That would probably be a question for Corp Counsel.
Yes.
Thank you. And any comments, Acting Director Redlin, in regards to, she had a question about how heirs gets paid.
Well, they have a flat fee.
And that is?
Please go ahead, Acting Director Redlin, and then we'll have a follow-up from Supervisor Shorsey.
Yeah, they basically, they have a flat fee that for the master plan. And then we would go in for separately for the engineering. And then at some point, normally when they have the engineering included, then they would be they would also get the permits for us, and they would administer the contract once we went out for bids for an actual construction. So they would be involved for the duration of the project. What that cost is, I have not the top of my head, I don't know. We would have to basically get that from them at the point when we are ready to go ahead and start funding this project.
So that would be in addition to the $1.8 million.
I believe, well, did you include that, Bruce?
That was not included. Again, that 1.8 is an estimate at the time where it is. If things get taken out, costs change too. You know, what you do, the extent of work. And we've originally we've been paid for the survey and the wetland and the concept. That was what we were paid for originally. Those three items have been paid for.
Yes.
And the reason, and I think it's important that that is transparent. And in terms of some of the items, do you get a percentage of items that are purchased, that sort of thing? So I think it would be very important for us when we're looking at the project to be very transparent about all of the costs related to it. So thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Shorsey. Next speaker is Supervisor Eisen, followed by Supervisor Bender, and then Supervisor Wingren. So please go ahead, Supervisor Eisen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My simple question is, where in the Parks Master Plan is the Grumman Landing project? Is it in there as the $15,000 improvement, or was that $15,000 applied to heirs for the concept?
I'll call on Acting Director Redlin.
Well, there isn't technically a master plan. If you're talking about the budget, the money that was budgeted in there was basically for what we've already paid them for, and then for the engineering portion of it.
So you have the engineering. How much money is in the budget for engineering for the Grumman Landing?
For 2021, correct me if I'm wrong, Vicki, we have to keep our 120,000 in there for our reserves. And after what we budgeted, there is about 50,000 in there right now that we can spend.
That is correct.
So there is $50,000 in the budget dedicated to the Grumman boat landing.
Yes.
It's identified. Okay, but it's not in the 5-year plan because you didn't plan on borrowing money?
Initially, when the budget was put together last year, no, we didn't plan on doing the project. We planned on doing a master plan for it, and then seeing where it went from there. And this really didn't come to our attention until after the budget had already gone through. That's when the citizens came forward and had a meeting with Rob and talked about their concerns. So a lot of that was, the budget was already in process before that the project even really got on our radar.
Well, the only thing I can say is that this project sounds pretty fishy.
Director Fitzgerald, any other comments in regards to the budget for this item, just to make sure?
No, she was correct that that's all was in the budget, but there was no mention for any type of capital improvement plan. So, and if any projects over $150,000, it needs to be a capital project, not in the operating budget.
Very good. Thank you. And thank you, Supervisor Eisen. Next speaker is Supervisor Bender, followed by Supervisor Wingren. Please go ahead, Supervisor Bender.
think where the problem actually comes in, Rob was planning on doing it in a section of three years. We were gonna do the parking lot, then we were gonna work on adding the boat launches, and then we're gonna work over on the kayaks. But it doesn't make any sense to put a brand new parking lot in and then haul heavy equipment in there to do the work to add the extra boat launches and the kayak launch. So the committee wanted to do it all at one time, thinking that that's the smartest way to do it. We basically put the parking lot in last, but it would look kind of foolish if we're adding boat launches and we don't add to the parking lot. You know, people would wonder what we were doing. So that is why we were coming to the county board. And Rob also told us that he would almost guarantee us we would get an 80-20 cost sharing. And where that went, I don't know. But when we basically, as a group, decided to move this project forward, that was the anticipation that we were under. It was an 80-20 cost sharing. And we were looking at, you know, we probably would have $100,000. So we were looking at the county to get like $200,000 so we could move that forward to apply for the grant. If they turn down the grant, then we don't need the county's money. We won't be doing the project, you know. So all we're really asking for is the county to say, if you can get the 80-20 grant, we're willing to give you the money you need, a couple $100,000, maybe 225,000, maybe less if we take more out of it. But that's the concept. And when we took a tour there with Rob and Vicky and Tom, and we went over that, we looked it all over, and that's what Rob told us. It was going to be an 80-20 cost sharing. We could do it in 3 years, but I'm not one to put a parking lot in and then bring heavy equipment in to do the work down by the water and start running trucks that weigh 80 or 100,000 pounds on a brand new paved parking lot. I just don't think it makes any sense, but hopefully we can get the support and move it forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Bender. Next speaker is Supervisor Wingren. Please go ahead, Supervisor Wingren. And if you could go ahead and unmute your mic, Supervisor Wingren.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Poor Vicky. You're put on a kind of a spot tonight. And I don't want to in any way criticize you at all, but this project doesn't seem well thought out at all, I must say. When you hear members of the committee constantly use, I've been keeping track here, the word hope, guess, maybe. I thought tonight was a night to get facts. Well, to say that the most troublesome part to me was you said after the budget, some citizens came forward to Rob, who called this meeting. So a few people come and say, "Oh, hey, we want this thing fixed up by our house." So we have this meeting nobody knows about, and all of a sudden, from that comes this huge project, which wasn't in the plan before the budget. Sounds as I hate to give him credit, but Mr. Eisen, it sounds fishy. Sure is true. A lot of fishiness here. Poor planning, very poor planning tonight, and I think we should just not proceed, or we should proceed very, very cautiously if we want to maintain our reputation of being open, honest, and accountable, because this is far from it right now. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Supervisor Wingren. Now, I don't see any other counselor or any other supervisor, so I'm going to open it up. Is there any other county board supervisor who has a call-in, comment, or question? Please just go ahead and open up your mic if that is the case. Seeing none, we'll go ahead and close that presentation. I want to thank Acting Director Vicki Redland for the information and for all your efforts, certainly, and for answering all the questions this evening. I also want to thank you, Mr. Morrow, for being here and for providing your information and expertise as well this evening. So thank you for taking the time. So that concludes our 4 presentations for this evening. And so with that, I'll call on Supervisor Albrecht for a motion to adjourn to March 16th. Supervisor Albrecht?
Move to adjourn till March 16th.
A motion, is there a second?
Second.
Second.
There's a motion and a second to adjourn to our March 16th business meeting. We'll do a voice vote. All those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. Very good. We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone. We'll see you in 2 weeks. Have a good rest of your evening. Bye now.
Bye-bye.